Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Now, everybody is like talking about Good Friday. Like everyone is talking about Easter Sunday, but I want you to stop just for one moment and look at the word. Look at the sky. Look at the calendar. Because when you do, the math does not add up. We are sitting here today on Shabbat. We are on Nisan 17. If the lamb was truly slain yesterday, on Friday, then I have to ask you something. I have to ask you something important. Is the word of God broken? Because God doesn't break patterns. God has never broken a pattern. He set a pattern at the foundation of the world, and that pattern has held every single day since. He doesn't need a Roman calendar to tell him what time it is. He already knows. While the whole world is waiting for Sunday morning to celebrate a tradition, we are standing on the very day the tomb actually opened. Today is Nisan 17, and God's calendar never changed. Now, before we get to the sacrifice, I need to back up, because the tradition skips something. The tradition wants to start the story on Friday, but God's story starts earlier than that. The tradition calls it Palm Sunday. But look at the calendar. Look at the word. If you follow the Hebrew calendar, if you follow the pattern God laid down in Exodus 12, the Triumphal Entry did not happen on a Sunday. It happened on a Monday. And it happened on a very specific day, pretty much Nisan 10. Why does that matter? Because God told Moses something very important about Nisan 10. Speak to all the congregation of Israel, saying, on the 10th of this month, each man is to take a lamb for his family, a lamb for each household. Exodus 12, verse 3. On Nisan 10, every family in Israel was commanded to take the Passover lamb, a spotless, perfect, unblemished lamb, and bring it to their home. They were to watch it, study it, look at it closely for 4 days to make sure it had no defect, no spot, no blemish. And then on Nisan 14, they would sacrifice it. So on Nisan 10, on Monday, when Yeshua rode into Jerusalem on that donkey, while people waved branches and cried out, Hosanna, he was not just making an entrance. He was presenting himself. He was walking into the city the same way the Passover lambs were being walked into the houses, into the homes. He was saying to all of Israel, look at me, inspect me, find a spot on me if you can. The next day, the large crowd that had come to the feast heard that Yeshua was coming to Jerusalem, and they took the branches of the palm trees, and they went out to meet him, shouting, Baruch Bashem Adonai, like blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, right? The King of Israel, John 12, verse 12 to 13. And what did he do when he arrived? Well, he went to the temple. He looked at everything. He saw what was happening there, and then he wept over the city. Not because he was weak, but because he knew what was coming. Because he loved them. Because he was the lamb walking in. And most of them didn't even know it. He spent 4 days being watched, questioned, tested, and examined by the chief priests, the scribes, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and so on. They threw every question they had at him, trying to find a flaw. They couldn't find one. Not a single spot, not a single blemish, because he was the perfect Lamb of God, and Nisan 10 was the day that he walked in. Then Pilate said to them, take him yourselves and judge him according to your Torah. The Judeans replied, we're not permitted to put anyone to death. John 18, verse 31. Even the Roman governor, a man with no reason to protect the Jewish teacher, looked at him and said, I find no fault in this man. No fault, spotless, just like the law required. Their tradition missed it because they lost the calendar. Now, before we talk about the stake, before we talk about the nails, before we talk about the blood, I need to take you somewhere first, okay? I need to take you to a garden, because here is something the tradition never tells you. The real battle was not won on the hill called Golgotha. The real battle The decisive battle was won in a garden called Gethsemane. And if you miss Gethsemane, you will never fully understand the stake. The name Gethsemane means oil press. It is a place where olives are crushed, where tremendous weight is applied until the oil, the very life of the olive, is pressed out. And that is exactly what happened to Yeshua in that garden. The weight of the sin of the entire world was placed on him, and it pressed and it squeezed until sweat became like drops of blood falling on the ground. And in his anguish, he was praying fervently, and his sweat became like drops of blood falling down upon the ground. Luke 22:4. There's a real medical condition, right? When a person is under extreme distress, when the weight of what they're facing is almost more than a human being can carry, the blood vessels around the sweat glands, they can break open and the blood just begins to come out through the skin, mixed with sweat, and the doctors knew about this. The body was already beginning to give before he ever touched the stake. He prayed 3 times. 3 times he went back to the Father. 3 times he asked the same question. Abba, Father, all things are possible for you. Remove this cup from me, yet not what I will, but what you will. Mark 14, verse 36. Now I need you to understand what that cup was. It was not just pain. It was not just suffering. The cup he was asking about was the cup of the full wrath of God against every sinner ever committed by every human being, like every sin ever committed by every human being who ever lived and who will ever live, right? The complete, total, undiluted judgment of a holy God being poured out on one man, on the perfect Lamb, so that it would not have to be like poured out on us. Well, 3 times he asked. 3 times he chose to stay. 3 times he said, not my will, but yours. And the battle was won right there, in the dirt, in the dark, in the garden, before a single soldier ever laid hands on him, before a single nail was ever hammered. Yeshua chose the stake in the Garden of Gethsemane. And that choice, that act of complete surrender to the will of the Father, was the moment that the enemy was defeated. He humbled himself, becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a stake. Philippians 2, verse 8. And then when Judas arrived with the soldiers, Yeshua stood up and walked toward them, and he did not run. He did not hide. He had already made his decision in the garden. The battle was finished before the blood was ever spilled. Now, some people are claiming that the sacrifice happened on the High Sabbath, on Nisan 15. But listen carefully, because this is where it gets simple. It is so simple that a child could understand it. The 14th is the blood. The 14th is the day of preparation. The 14th is the day of death. The 15th is the rest. The 15th is the High Sabbath. The 15th is the day of deliverance. You don't kill the lamb on a day that you're supposed to be walking out of Egypt. You just don't. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a year-old male. You may take it from the sheep or from the goats. You must watch over it until the 14th day of the same month. Then the whole assembly of the community of Israel is to slaughter it at twilight. Exodus 12, verse 5 to 6. The 14th, not the 15th, the 14th. When you mix up the 14th and the 15th, you blur the line between the sacrifice and the Sabbath, and you take that day that was meant for death and you put it on a day that was not meant for deliverance. And like when you do that, you have just destroyed the whole pattern. Nisan 15 is the Exodus. On the 14th, Israel was still behind the door, covered by the blood, right? On the 15th, they were on the road. They were moving. They were free. If you say that Yeshua died on Nisan 15, you're saying that he died on the day of freedom, but no. He died on the 14th, so that by the 15th, death had no more work to do. He was already resting because the work was finished. Yeshua said to him, "It is accomplished," and he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. John 19, verse 30. So now I just need to talk to you about something that, well, that stained glass window will never show you in the church, something that the pretty paintings on the church walls hide from you. And I need to talk to you about what actually happened to his body because if you don't understand what they did to him, and if you keep looking at the polished golden symbols hanging on the wall, you will never feel the full weight of what he paid, truly. So let us just talk about the nails first, okay? Every picture you have ever seen shows the nails going through his palms, right through the middle on the hands, but here's the truth, and this is not my opinion. This is autonomy and archaeology and also science. So nails through the palms, that does not work. The soft tissue around the bones of the palm cannot hold the weight of a grown man. The flesh would tear, the body would fall, and the Romans, they were brutal, and they were not stupid, and they were efficient. They knew exactly what they were doing. Medical studies have shown that the nails were most likely driven through the wrists, specifically to hold the full weight of a human body for hours. Right? Because there's a gap between the bones of the wrist, and that gap is just strong enough to hold the body. And when the nail is driven through that space, it severs a nerve, the largest nerve in the hand, and the pain that nerve produces is damaged, and it's so severe, so burning, and so electric that the word we use today to describe unbearable pain comes directly from this act. The word is excruciating, and it literally means out of the cross, or like out of crucifixion. The pain had no other name. And we have proof, real physical archaeological proof, because in 1968, in northeast Jerusalem, archaeologists, they just uncovered the bones of a man, and he had been crucified by the Romans in the 1st century, right around the time of Yeshua. And when they found him, there was an iron nail, 11.5 centimeters long, so nearly like 5 inches, still driven straight through his heel bone. And it was still there because the soldiers hammered the nail through his foot into the olive wood of the stake, and the tip of the nail, it just hit a knot in the wood, and then it bent, and they could not pull it back out. So when they took the body down, they had to bury him with the nail still in his heel and place the wood still attached. 5 inches of iron through bone, and this is what Rome did to the people, and this is the reality behind the symbol. And now I need to just talk to you about the instrument in itself. So everywhere you will look on the church buildings and around people's necks and on their clothes and on the walls of the hospitals and schools and maybe even a cemetery, sadly, you will see and you will find the same symbol, a cross, a T-shape, right? But here is what the original Greek word of God actually says. When the writers of the New Testament described the instrument Yeshua hung on, they did not use a word that means two beams crossing each other. They used two Greek words, statoros, which literally means an upright stake, a single pole, a single piece of timber driven into the ground, and a xylon, which means like a tree, a living tree, not a Roman T stake, like a pole, a tree. The God of our fathers raised Yeshua, whom they had killed by hanging him on a tree. Acts 5 verse 30. So Messiah redeemed us from the curse of the Torah, having become the curse for us, for it is written, cursed is everyone who hangs on a tree. Galatians 3 verse 13. So a tree. The apostles called it a tree every single time, not a Roman cross, so like a tree, an upright stake. And the Romans themselves, the Roman writers, the historians of that empire, they just described crucifixion on a single upright pole, and they just called it the crux, simplex, like a simple stake. And they used it because it was faster and it just required less wood, and wood was scarce in Jerusalem. And I mean, Rome was just brutal, but Rome was very practical, and they were not building a religious symbol. They were just building killing machines from whatever timber they could actually find. Now think about what a single upright stake does to a human body, okay? When your arms are nailed above your head and your body hangs straight down, the entire weight of your chest collapses downwards, and your lungs are filled with fluid, and your diaphragm locks. To take a single breath, just one breath, you have to push yourself upward. You have to press your weight up through those nails in your wrist, and you have to push through the nail in your heel, and you have to lift yourself just enough to get one gasp of air, and then you sink back down, and then you have to do it again every single breath, Like it was a choice to keep fighting. And when Yeshua, he finally chose to stop fighting, he finally bowed his head and gave up his spirit. And it was not defeat, it was just completion. He humbled himself, becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a stake. Philippians 2 verse 8. And the sign, the one that said King of the Jews in 3 languages, was placed above his head on an upright stake, and there's room above the hands for that sign, so the math works, and the autonomy works, the archaeology that works, and the word works. Now, where did the cross shape come from? Okay? Now, I'll tell you. And you could study this for yourself if you wish. The cross symbol, the Tau, T-A-U, was used in Babylon and in Egypt for centuries before Yeshua was ever born. It was connected to a pagan god called Tammuz. The prophet Ezekiel saw God's own people weeping and mourning for Tammuz right inside the temple, and God called it an abomination. He said to me, "Do you see this, son of man? You will see even greater abominations than these." And he brought me to the entrance of the north gate of the house of Adonai, and I saw women sitting there weeping for Tammuz, Ezekiel 8 verse 15. When Rome converted the faith, they did not throw away their pagan symbols, they renamed them. They took the stake of Yeshua and just blended it with the cross of Tammuz so that the pagans would just feel comfortable walking in. And today, people are just bowing to the symbol of a false god, thinking that they're honoring the true Messiah. We have been lied to about the times. We have been lied to about the timber. He wasn't on a Roman cross honoring Tammuz. Okay? He was on an upright stake, hanging on a tree, as the law required. Looking at the people, he was dying to set free from these very systems of deception. Now, the religious leaders, they came to Yeshua one day and they said, "Show us a sign, prove to us who you are." And Yeshua just looked at them and he just gave them only one answer, just one. He said, "For just as Jonah was in the belly of the great fish for 3 days and 3 nights, so the Son of Man will be in the heart of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights. Matthew 12 verse 40. 3 days and 3 nights. That is the only sign that he gave. And that is the only test he put on himself to prove that he was the Messiah. So let me ask you a question. If he died on Friday, late Friday afternoon, and rose on Friday night, that is one night. Saturday, that is one day. Saturday night, that is 2 nights. Sunday morning, that's a piece of a day. That is 2 nights and 1.5 days. And that is not what he said. If the tradition is right, then Yeshua the Messiah failed his own test. But I'm here to tell you, he did not fail. The tradition failed. And if you follow the tradition of man, you lose the sign of Jonah. And if you follow the pattern of God, the 72 hours, they fit perfectly. And here's how the pattern actually looks in 2026. So follow this closely, okay? Nisan 14, Wednesday, April 1st, the lamb is slain, Passover, the blood is applied. This is the day of death. Nisan 15, Thursday, April 2nd, the High Sabbath, the feast of unleavened bread begins. Night 1, day 1 in the tomb. Nisan 16, Friday, April 3, night 2, day 2 in the tomb, the day between the 2 Sabbaths. Nisan 17, Saturday, April 4th, today. Night 3, day 3, the weekly Sabbath, first fruits, the resurrection, the tomb is empty. There were 2 Sabbaths that week. Most people only know about one, the weekly Saturday Sabbath, like today, right? But the High Sabbath, the feast Sabbath, fell on Thursday that year. And that is why the disciples, they had a rush. They were preparing the body before the first Sabbath. The high one arrived at sundown on Wednesday night. By the time Saturday morning arrived, by the time this Shabbat began, the full 3 days and 3 nights had already been completed, and the sign of Jonah had already been fulfilled. And the king was already out of the grave, and the 72 hours are up. So today is Nisan 17, and we're not standing on the eve of the resurrection. We are standing on the anniversary of it. The work was done before Shabbat even started. Now I need you to understand something. God doesn't just pick dates by accident. God is not random. He's actually quite precise. He is exact. And he has been marking this date Nisan 17 for thousands of years. All right? So before Yeshua ever walked this earth, before Miriam ever sang at the shore of the sea, God was already signing his name on the 17th of Nisan. Let me show you his fingerprints, all right? Noah's Ark, in Genesis 8 verse 4, after the whole world had been covered by the flood, after destruction had done its work, the ark came to rest on the mountain of Ararat on the 17th day of the 7th month, and the Word was resurrected from the flood on the same date that Yeshua rose from the grave. So God rested the ark on Nisan 17, and the world began again on Nisan 17. So the Red Sea, Exodus 14, Israel crossed the Red Sea on Nisan 17. They walked through the walls of the water. They left slavery behind. They stepped out of one world and into a new one as a free nation. On the very same date, the tomb stood empty behind them. Life had, death behind them, life ahead of them, right? Manna, that stopped. And Joshua 5, verse 10 to 12, after 40 years in the wilderness, 40 years of God feeding his people with bread from heaven every single morning, the manna stopped on Nisan 17. Why? Because they had finally arrived, and they ate the first fruits of the promised land, and the old provision gave way to the new on Nisan 17. Esther's victory, right? Esther 5 verse 7, Haman had signed a death warrant against all of God's people. A decree of death was hanging over their heads. But on Nisan 17, the decree was reversed. Death became life. The enemy fell, and people were saved. A pattern of resurrection before the resurrection. The ark had rested. The Red Sea parted. Manna stopped. Tomb empty. All on the same day. All on Nisan 17. Today. This is not a coincidence. There's no such thing as a coincidence in God's calendar. This is a pattern. And this is a pattern that God has been pointing at, like this day, this exact day, like from the very beginning of the world. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Hebrews 13 verse 8. Now I want to tell you about the first person who found out. It was not Peter. It was not John. It was not one of the 11. It was a woman who had been set free from 7 demons. A woman who had been at the stake when everyone else ran. A woman who had watched them take the body down and seal the tomb, and her name was Mary Magdalene. While it was still dark before the sun had even come up, she came to the tomb. Now on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene comes to the tomb early while it is still dark, and she sees the stone rolled away from the tomb. John 20 verse 1. And she was not coming to celebrate, she was just coming to grieve. And she was coming because she loved him. She did not know where else to go. And when she looked in and saw the tomb empty, she thought someone had stolen the body. So she stood outside and she was weeping. And she turned around, and there he was. But she did not recognize him at first, and she thought he was the gardener, and she said, "Just tell me where they put him, and I'll go get him myself." And then he said one word. Yeshua said to her, "Miriam." Turning around, she said to him in Hebrew, "Rabboni," which means like teacher. So John 20 verse 16. Just her name, just Mary, and she knew. And that is the voice of the shepherd calling his own sheep by name. That is the voice that speaks to you in the dark. That is the voice that finds you at the empty tomb when you have ran out of hope. He knows your name. And when he says it, you know it's him. And then he gave her a commission. And he said, Go tell my brothers." She became the first person to proclaim the resurrection. A woman who had been considered worthless by her own society was chosen to carry the greatest news in human history. God does not choose the way the world chooses. Yeshua said to her, "Stop clinging to me, for I have not yet ascended to my Father. Go to my brothers and tell them I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." John 20 verse 17. And after the resurrection, after he walked with them, he ate with them, he showed them his hands, his wrists, right, his feet, heel, and he ascended And what did the disciples do? They did not mourn. They did not hide. They went back to Jerusalem with great joy, and they prayed and they waited, and the fire of the Holy Spirit came down on them like tongues of flame, and they went out to the ends of the earth proclaiming that the Lamb was alive. And that is the pattern: the stake, the tomb, the mourning, the commission, the fire, in that order every time. Now I want to tell you something about museums. Okay? When a museum has a rare artifact, something irreplaceable, something priceless, do you think they let you hold it? Do you think that they hand it to you? No. They give you a replica, a copy, a counterfeit, because if you drop the copy, well, it doesn't matter. If you break the copy, nobody cries. But the real thing, well, they lock that away, right? They hide it. They keep it for certain people, for certain purposes. They don't want everyone to have the real thing. Well, that's exactly what happened to the gospel. The real artifact, the ancient path, is still there, but systems of power locked it away and gave you a copy, a safe copy, a comfortable copy, a copy that doesn't challenge anything, a copy called Good Friday, a copy called Easter Sunday, a copy that you can wear on a chain around your neck without it ever costing you a thing. Now, Yeshua himself, he said this. He said that the road is narrow, and he was not joking. Enter through the narrow gate, for the gate is wide, and the way is broad that leads to destruction, and those who enter through it are many. How narrow is the gate, and difficult the way that leads to life, and those who find it are few. Matthew 7, verse 13 to 14. When you wake up to the truth, you will be standing on a mountain of amazement, believe me. But you will also be mourning, because you will see people that are all around you who think they're walking on light, but they're holding a museum copy and just calling it the kingdom of God, unfortunately. But you will try to explain it, and some will not want to listen. And this is just how Jeremiah felt too, because he saw destruction coming, and he tried to warn them, and he said, we will not walk in it. Well, actually, they said, we will not walk in it, right? So stand at the crossroads and look and ask for the ancient paths, where the good way is, and walk in it, and you will find rest for your souls. But they said, we will not walk in it. So Jeremiah 6, verse 16. But here I am, and as Yeshua said, if you love my sheep, feed them. So here's the solid food, and here is something that you can chew on, and something that you can study for yourself. And just, so be like the Bereans, and search the scriptures yourselves, and see if these things are so, okay? Now, these people were more open-minded than those in Thessalonica, for they received the word with all eagerness, examining the scriptures daily to see if these things were so. Acts 17, verse 11. Now, the cross is at the church, everywhere on the buildings, the necks, the clothes, all of it. Books, you name it. It traces back to Babylon. But it's being sold to you as holy. Ash Wednesday, Babylon, traces straight back to the morning of Tammuz, the marking of the forehead with the ash. That is not an invention of the New Testament. It is a carryover from the Babylonian religious system. When you walk into a Catholic church and you dip your fingers in the water and make a sign of the cross touching your forehead and your chest and then your shoulders, you're not just performing a tradition. You are being initiated into a system that has been marking people with that same symbol for centuries. And by connecting your mind and your heart through that motion, which are in conflict, you are uniting them. But united to what? Whose pattern? Right? I'm not here to be your enemy. I'm not here to start drama. I'm just here because I love the sheep. Okay? I want to keep it true. And if you love the sheep, you tell them the truth. And then you feed them, right? So come out of her, my people, so that you do not participate in her sins, so that you do not receive her plagues. Revelation 18, verse 4. Now listen, the feasts of God are not just celebrations. So Easter and Good Friday, right? Those are festivals of man. Like, they provide a feeling, they give you a tradition, but they don't remove the leaven that's in your life, right? The sin, right? They don't require of you to leave Egypt. They just bring Egypt into the sanctuary and put a symbol on top of it. But the appointed times, the modem, right? Those are different. Like, God didn't just give us feasts just so we could eat and have chocolate, right? He gave us feasts because he is trying to do something spiritual inside of you. And when you physically remove the leaven from your home during the Feast of Unleavened Bread, you are not just cleaning your kitchen. You are walking out of your own Egypt spiritually. You are not just talking about salvation. You are experiencing a little taste of it. And there is a pattern in the feasts. And if you follow the pattern, you will find the power. So get rid of a little leaven so that you may be a new batch of dough, just as you are unleavened, for Messiah, our Passover Lamb, has been sacrificed. Therefore let us celebrate the feast, not with old leaven, the leaven of malice and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread, the matzah of sincerity and truth. 1 Corinthians 5, verse 7 to 8. Now, some people, they will use Paul's own words, okay? I just want to say, they'll use Paul's own words to defend the very tradition that Paul himself would have actually torn down. They will quote Galatians 1:8, if anyone preaches a different gospel, let them be cursed, to protect the system that Paul never knew, and many other verses when it comes to doctrine. Paul was a Hebrew of Hebrews, a Pharisee of Pharisees. Paul did not know Good Friday. Paul knew Passover. Paul did not know Easter Sunday, but Paul knew first fruits. So think of it this way. Imagine a beautiful ancient city built on a solid rock, okay, with streets, patterns, and architecture that has meaning. And now imagine someone poured a thick layer of concrete over that whole city, paving it over, covering it up, and then just building their own city on top of that. Well, that is what happened to the gospel. Rome didn't change the gospel slowly. They just built a parking lot over it and called it sacred tradition. So in the council in 325 in Nicaea, so Emperor Constantine basically decreed that the celebration must be cut off from the Hebrew calendar entirely. His own letter following the council stated that they wanted nothing in common with the detestable Jewish crowd, and that is not theology, that is politics, and that is hatred being called holiness. In the Council of Laodicea in 364 AD, just 40 years later, they went even further. Canon 29 declared Christians must not rest on the Sabbath. They must work on Saturdays. And if anyone is found keeping the Sabbath, let them be cut off from Messiah. And they took the fourth commandment, the very commandment God called the blessing, a sign between himself and his people forever, and they declared that anyone who obeyed it was accursed. So Adonai blessed the Sabbath day, made it holy, Exodus 20, verse 11. I also gave them my Sabbath to be a sign between me and them, so that they might know that I am Adonai who sanctifies them, Ezekiel 20, verse 12. You cannot curse what God has already blessed. You can't. And yet they tried. And the world followed them. And this is exactly what Jeroboam did in the Bible. And he devised the feast in his own heart. And at the time he made up, right, to keep people from going to the true appointed place at the true appointed time. And he just changed the calendar, and he changed the priesthood, and he changed the pattern, and the whole nation just followed him into it. So he devised from his own heart a month in the 8th month, on the 15th day of the month, and made offerings on the altar which he had made in Bethel. So 1 Kings 12, verse 33. Pavement cannot stop a seed from growing like a rose that grew from the concrete. So today is Nisan 17. Underneath all that Roman concrete, the life is still there. The ancient path is still there. And it is time to stop polishing the pavement and start digging for the real deal. You keep quoting Paul to protect your traditions, but Paul would be the first one to tear those traditions down. You're defending the pavement and not the ancient path. Now here's the hardest part of everything that I have said today, and I need you to hear it. The people of Israel wanted to get out of Egypt, but they didn't want Egypt to get out of them. That is why the moment things got difficult, the moment the road got hard, they built the golden calf, and they took the gold of Egypt and the symbols of Egypt and the religion of Egypt, and they just tried to worship the true God through the image of a false one. And that is exactly what the church has done. And they took the gold of Babylon and the cross of Tammuz and the calendar of Rome and the rituals of the pagans, and they called it Christianity. They don't follow the way. You have got to leave Egypt. I know it's hard. And some of you have grandmothers who prayed over those traditions, and some of you may have even grown up in those cathedrals, and traditions feel old, and we might mistake old for holy, but age is not authority, the word is authority. And I want you to notice something beautiful. Israel didn't just stay in their houses after the blood was applied. They just walked out. Noah, he didn't stay in the ark after it rested. He stepped out. Yeshua did not stay in the tomb. He came out. So the question for Shabbat for today, right now, is this. Are you still living like you're in the tomb? Or are you ready to walk in a new beginning of Nisan 17, right? So therefore, if anyone is in Messiah, he is a new creation. The old things have passed away. Behold, all things have become new. 2 Corinthians 5, verse 17. So please, we have spent today uncovering the museum-grade truth that Rome tried to pave over, okay? We have seen the Lamb walk into Jerusalem on Nisan 10, presenting himself for inspection just as the law required. We have seen the battle that was won not on the hill, but in the garden, in the dark, in the dirt of Gethsemane. We have seen the 5-inch iron nail still in the heel of a man that was buried 2,000 years ago, proof that this was real, that this was brutal, and that this was not a symbol of a sacrifice. Not a symbol, but a sacrifice, sorry. And we have seen the sign of Jonah and the 72-hour mathematical proof that Yeshua is king. And we have seen the anathemas, basically the curse that men put on what God called holy. And we have seen the fingerprints of Nisan 17 written across thousands of years of history. And we have seen Miriam weeping at an empty tomb and hearing her name called by the only voice that could put her back together. But I have to tell you, information without transformation is just more leaven in the house. The Father didn't want Israel to know, the Father didn't want Israel to know about the Promised Land. He wanted them to leave Egypt and walk towards it. Like, you cannot celebrate the resurrection while you're still wearing the jewelry of Babylon. And you cannot claim the blood of the Lamb while you are still bowing to the cross of Tammuz. So today is Nisan 17. The ark has rested, the Red Sea was open, the tomb is empty, and the Father is asking you the same question that he just asked him at the shoreline, like, how long will you waver between two options? If Adonai is God, follow him, but if Baal, follow him. 1 Kings 18, verse 21. If you want the real gospel, the ancient path, you have to be willing to drop the counterfeit. You have to be willing to be called strange by the systems of men so that you can be blessed by the creator of time. I am calling you to an exodus. Not a physical move, but a spiritual departure. Leave the calendar of Rome. Stop letting a pagan system tell you when to meet with God. And go find the appointed times, the modem that he has set from the beginning. And don't just go to the closest church either, right? Go to the one that always grows you closer to God. Leave the symbols of Babylon. Stop branding your heart and your home with the marks of a system. God has been calling you out since Moses was born, right? So just stop decorating life with the symbols of the place the Father is calling you to leave. Leave the leaven of tradition. If it is not the word, if it cannot be found in the pattern God laid down, then it does not belong in your walk. Get the leaven out. Search the scriptures like the Bereans, right? Do the work, honestly. Yeshua said the road is narrow, but most will stay in the cathedrals. Most will stay in the gift shops with the replicas. But for the few, for the ones who are truly hungry, they will be fed. The ancient path is still open, and the narrow road is still there. Don't just observe the Shabbat. Become a Shabbat person. Don't just talk about Exodus. Walk out of your Egypt. The 72 hours are up. The sign of Jonah fulfilled. The Lamb was slain on Nisan 10, right? The battle was won in Gethsemane. The stake, real. Nails, real. Blood, real. Tomb, empty. King, risen. Egypt, behind us. Let's go. Now, don't take my word for it, okay? Do what the Bereans did. Open up the scriptures. Check it for yourself. Serious. And here's where to start. I'll help you. Okay? Exodus 12, verse 1 to 14. The Passover instructions. Find the 14th. Find the 10th. Find Nisan 10. Lamb selection. Okay? Find the blood. Find the pattern. Leviticus 23. All of the appointed times laid out by God himself. Read every one. Every one. Matthew 12, verse 38 to 40. Okay? The sign of Jonah. Count the days and the nights yourself. Luke 22, verse 39 to 46. Okay, Gethsemane. Read what it cost them before the stake. Genesis 8, verse 4. The ark resting on the 17th. Look at the date. John 20, verse 1 to 18. Mary at the tomb, read who he appeared to first. Why? Right? Acts 5, verse 30, and Galatians 3, verse 13. What the apostles called the instrument, a tree, a stake. Ezekiel 8, verse 14, the weeping for Tammuz. Read what God called it. I'll give you a hint. Abomination. The king, 1 Kings 12, verse 25 to 33. Jeroboam's false feasts. See if it sounds familiar. And Jeremiah 6, verse 16, the ancient paths. And the answer the people gave. Pavement cannot stop a seed from growing. Again, like a rose that grew from the concrete. Today is Nisan 17. The life is still here, and the ancient paths are still open. And I need to say one more thing before we go, okay? Just one more thing. I need you to hear this clearly. There are leaders in the world right now, powerful, powerful leaders with gold on their robes and cameras that are in their faces, who stand before the whole earth, and then quote Prophet Isaiah. They quote the part where God says, your hands are full of blood. They say it like a warning to the world. They are right to say it. But I wonder if they have read the verse right before it. Because in Isaiah chapter 1, God is not just talking about violence. He is talking about religion. He was talking about people who came to the temple with their offerings and their holy days and their festivals, and he said, your new moons and your appointed feasts my soul hates. They have become a burden to me. I'm weary of bearing them. Isaiah 1 verse 14. And then right after that, he said, your hands are full of blood. Do you understand what he is saying? He is saying that when you celebrate feasts, you invented. When you replace what I commanded with what you created, and then you come to me with your prayers and your rituals and your public displays, I am not listening. The very religious system you are performing is the problem. The man-made holidays are the problem. The traditions that replace my pattern are the problem. And then you come to me and quote Isaiah? Man. When you spread out your hands in prayer, I will hide my eyes from you. Even if you make many prayers, I will not listen. Your hands are full of blood. Isaiah 1 verse 15. Now, you also need to hear this about public deeds, okay? There are leaders who will wash feet on television, who will perform acts of service before cameras and crowds so that the whole world can watch. And they will call that humility. And they call it a teaching moment. But Yeshua is very specific about this. He was not vague about this, and he was not soft. And he said, take care not to practice your righteousness before others to be seen by them, for you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven. Okay? So when you give, do not sound a shofar before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, so that they may be glorified by men. Amen, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. Matthew 6, verse 1 to 2. So when an act of service becomes a spectacle, when the cameras are rolling and the world is watching and the whole point is that everyone sees you do it, Yeshua said you already got your reward. The applause of the crowd is all you will get. The Father is not watching that performance. That deed was for the world, and it was not for him. And I'm not saying this to attack. Okay, I'm saying this because the pattern matters. When you perform public religion while privately replacing God's commands with your own traditions, that is not humility, beloved. That is the very thing Isaiah warned against thousands of years ago. And this brings me to the word I want to leave you with. The Greek word is anomia. You will find it throughout the New Testament, and it's translated as lawlessness or iniquity. But it doesn't just mean breaking a rule. It means living as though the law does not apply to you. It means deciding in your heart, in your institution, and in your council that your tradition can replace his commandment. It means taking what God called holy and swapping it out for what you find more convenient. When you replace the stake of the cross with the cross of Tammuz, that is anomia. When you replace the Nisan 14 with Good Friday, anomia. When you replace the seventh day Sabbath with the Sunday and then curse anyone who keeps the day God blessed, anomia. When you wash feet on television while your institution has spent centuries cursing the very calendar of the Messiah you claim to follow, that is anomia. Yeshua himself said it plainly. And he said there would be people who would stand before him on that day, people who prophesied in his name, who did mighty works in his name, and he would look at them and say, I never knew you. Get away from me, you workers of anomia, you workers of lawlessness. Now remember, lawlessness means Torahlessness, and Torahlessness means like instructionlessness, right? Matthew 7, verse 23. Not people who never claimed to believe, people who performed religion their whole entire lives. People who had the name on their lips, but the traditions of Babylon in their practice. This is why I have stood before you today and given you the hard foot. Well, mainly food. Let's put it that way. A little push. And that's why I have not given you a comfortable message, really, that sends you home feeling warm, all right? I'm not here to perform for any of you, okay? I'm just here to feed you because I really love the sheep. And if I truly love you guys, like, I cannot hand you a counterfeit and then just smile while I do it. I'm not like that. I can't be fake. Look, the prophet Isaiah warned that blood on hands is not always the blood of violence. Like, sometimes it is the blood of silence. The blood of a shepherd who saw the wolves coming and said nothing because it was easy. It was easier to keep the peace. I'm not keeping the peace today. Like, I'm just keeping the pattern, okay? So go home, please study, search the word for yourself. And when you find the ancient paths, like when you see it for your own self, with your own eyes, with your own Bible, don't look back at Egypt. Like, do not look back at the gift shop. Right? Do not look back at the traditions that felt safe. Please walk out. Just walk out. Wash yourselves. Make yourselves clean. Okay? Remove the evil of your deeds from before my eyes. Stop doing evil. Learn to do good. Seek justice. Correct the oppressor. Defend the fatherless. Plead for the widow. Isaiah 1, verse 16 to 17. Okay? That is what God was asking for in Isaiah. Not better festivals, not more impressive rituals, not louder prayers and bigger crowds watching you wash feet, right? Like, he wanted people who would just stop performing religion and just start living righteousness. People who would seek his pattern, his actual pattern, and walk in it no matter like what it cost him. So today, Nisan 17, the ark rested, sea parted, manna stopped, tomb empty, ancient path open, and the Father is still asking the same question that he's always asked, right? How long will you waver between two options? God, Baal, right? So stop performing, start walking, and the narrow road is still there. So with that being said, y'all can go in peace, and peace be with you. Shalom.